Alrighty, we are live, just like that.
That's scary how easy that went.
Yeah, it is scary. And we already have 30 plus people joining in. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Hey, Philippe from Belgium. Um, I think Philippe joins a lot of our webinars. So thank you, Philippe. And Vishal, uh, welcome again. Ahmed, where are you from, Ahmed? Can just say hello and where are you from? That will give us like we are speaking in front of a wide audience through in the whole world. So that's an awesome feeling and unreal as well. By the
Yeah.
way, guys, today we have a special guest and we are broadcasting on a lot of streams. So hope to see a lot of new people as well. And I have the special guest. He is a friend of mine, and we have been planning to do this for a long time. Those who don't know, I don't know how to pronounce your last name, but I only know you as Remkus. So Remkus de Vries, is that right?
De Vries.
De Vries, nice.
Yeah, but
Um,
it's fine.
Go ahead. Sorry about that. Sorry for killing your name. So, and just like a formal introduction, Remkus, as I said, is a close friend of mine. He is in the WordPress speed, security, and adjacent industry. He is a specialist focused on speed, security, and scalability. And he's also co-founder of Scanfully, which helps site owners stay ahead of performance and security issues, which he stands for. Ramkus also runs within WordPress a newsletter and a podcast, which is very popular. If you haven't subscribed to it, go and subscribe to it. For those who are passionate about building WordPress sites, and he shares insights on YouTube. So, welcome Ramkus to this webinar,
Thank you for having me.
and
Uh,
thanks for doing this today.
yeah,
We have a bunch of people saying hi, so we should probably say hi back to them. So,
yeah, that's a
yeah.
lot of highs.
A lot
Hello,
of eyes.
everyone.
And Nicholas
Yeah,
Hans from Netherlands, close to you. Where are you from, Hans, in the Netherlands? Remkos is also from the Netherlands. We should have
yeah,
told people about
yeah,
that,
yeah,
by the way.
yeah. Yeah. I am from the Netherlands, indeed. I live in the northern part of the Netherlands. I'm from Friesland, so that's a country within a country.
Oh,
Um,
okay. How
and
far is it from the one and only city I know, which is Amsterdam?
it's about an hour and a half of driving, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you live in a small country that from top to bottom is 3.5 hours and from left to right is an hour and 45, then an hour and a half is a big drive. Um, but yeah, it's I'm in probably in the least populated area of the Netherlands.
Okay. So that must be nice, right?
I like it. I like it. In fact, I live in the middle of the absolutely nowhere. So I have no neighbors inside of half a kilometer. So I
Well,
like it.
yeah, that nice and boring at the same time.
Yes. Yeah. The
I'm from
downside is
Bangalore, by the way.
the downside is we have wolves roaming
Oh,
the
shit.
land here. So that's
No, no way. Oh, man.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
All right. So practicing our basically hunting skills
Yeah.
and survival skills.
Yeah.
So yeah, so we have a bunch of folks joining in. Kenneth from Tampa, Florida, right? From Estonia. I'll say this is a very good mixture from a lot of countries. Ahmed, hey, Michael, hey, David from Uganda. David was working for us as a content writer. Great writer, by the way. Dishant, Matthias, Matt from Pennsylvania. Do you guys also feel a little bit of delay from our side in some manner? Because we are feeling it. Ephraim from Barcelona, Heinrich from Vienna, JP, welcome again. Hey, Bud. Hey, TK.
Seriously, bud?
Seriously, Bud. But thank you for coming. No, seriously. Hey, Shoaib
And
from Jaipur.
thanks for the
Go ahead.
kind word, Ahmed.
Thanks for the what?
He said something really nice. Ahmed from Turkey.
Oh, right. I've completely forgot it. So yeah, uh,
I don't know if I'm a philosopher, but I'll take the compliment any day.
that's a good positioning, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Being a philosopher, yeah. Yeah, it's a good. But I think Ahmed nailed it. So thank you, Ahmed. Hey Paul. Hey Matthias. Hey Joel. JP is from Norway. We know that. So, welcome everybody. Without further ado, let's get started. Today, we have two important topics to talk about. One is performance, another is security. And both are really, really important for WordPress, not if not for every website out there. And especially in case of WordPress, we have been seeing that WordPress is slow, WordPress can be hacked, and so these are either myth or real. We need to we today we will see, and we have Remkus to guide us through these two important topics and things to learn today. So we will be covering some topics like what are the performance and security matrices, how to set benchmark so that your clients are happy, and what is the role of hosting provider when it comes to performance and security, and then debugging performance issues. And we will also see, if the time permits, cool demo, which covers WPC, advanced WPC CLI commands, some network tab, which can be very, very powerful. And I know a lot of people don't even know network tab. Uh, and I didn't know when I started, right? As a regular person, you never know. But then when you are equipped with that, you become really, really powerful, almost like a superhero. So
Almost.
almost, yeah, in WordPress you cannot be ever superhero, right? So it's
Yeah,
always things to learn. So,
it's also
and we have 85 people joining in, so that's awesome. So let's get started. Remkus, do you want to take it away from understanding site performance and security matrices?
yeah. So both security and performance are, everybody knows that they're important, right? So it's not that's not a new thing to hear today.
Mm-hmm.
What most people don't fully realize is that it's not a set and forget thing, and it's not let me just install a plugin and we're good, we're done. So there's a there's a saying where they say speed kills conversions, and that is as true as any of the things you'll hear about both security and performance. Because if your site is not performant, you'll have a problem converting visitors to clients, or have them submit any forms, or sign up for newsletters, or all of those things. As well as, if there's a security layer that is easily bypassed, it will show in your site, and that will deter people as well. So it is probably the most important combination of two things that your site is never fully optimized on. I think that's as much as you'll never be a full-on WordPress superhero, your site will also never be secure enough, and it will also never be fast enough. And that's a good thing to realize. So some of the things that we're trained to believe is, if I turn on a WordPress performance plugin, and you can name any which version you can think of. There's a whole bunch of them out there, but the general perception is, if I turn on that plugin, then my site is fast.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm here to tell you that that is not.
It's not. It's not the case.
No,
No,
no, no.
man, no.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
that's bummer.
so
That's a bummer. Yeah.
this is some trauma you'll have to process. I get it. I get it. But
Yeah.
the once you start wanting to fix your performance on all layers, you'll have to start with, what am I actually doing with turning on a performance plugin? And what a performance plugin is it basically hides the performance of your site in a cached version. And it doesn't matter if that's WP Rocket, NitroPack, or Cloudflare's APO. and there's a whole bunch more. I'm just naming the top three as I use them. There's really no need to think that that is the solver of all problems, because it hides the performance, and it can do it brilliantly. It can make your site faster, sure, but it doesn't actually make it faster in when you realize when the vast majority of your visitors might not even see the optimized cached version. And that has to do with cache invalidation, that has to do with cache hit ratio, that has to do with certainly if you're logged in e-commerce, if you come in your site from a link that has a tracking URL part at the end, which you'll see, for instance, when you send a newsletter, it will, all of those things will invalidate cache.
So
that
people
means,
who are clicking on the newsletter, they don't
Yep.
necessarily see your homepage, which is faster, quote unquote. They see the uncached version most probably, and
Yep.
that is slower. So it's like putting on a bandage on top
That's-
of, right?
that is the best description. Yeah, it's a band-aid, and in some cases that band-aid is strong enough for what it needs to do. So if you do not run any e-commerce or newsletters or any other cache invalidating things on your site, then chances are higher chances are higher that the version that the visitor sees is a cached version, and thus faster. But
Right.
it doesn't end there, because you're from Bangalore, I'm from Friesland. There's quite a bit of distance between us. I mean, you can't tell really, because we're very close on the screen, but there's quite a bit of distance between us, and that means it just might so happen that you see a cached version of the site that you and I visit at the same time, and I see an uncached version. That has to do with the location, and my version might be perceived slower than yours does.
So bottom line, caching does help, but it is not, it is just one layer. And there are multiple layers to explore, where non-cached version should be faster. And there are performance things we should take care in other layers. What are the other layers do we have, Ramkas? And by the way, there is also a question about, is the Perf Matter plugin also in the same kind of paradigm?
Perf Matters is a wonderful and great plugin. I use it a lot. It's one of my staple plugins, but not because it caches, but because it optimizes. It helps you in unloading scripts where certain scripts don't need to be. For instance, if I have just one contact form, it doesn't make a lot of sense that on every single page on my site, all the CSS and JavaScript files for my contact form are loaded. That doesn't make any sense, right? So you want to limit that to just the contact page if that's the case. A simple scenario, but you can imagine there's a whole bunch of plugins loading stuff on all the pages that don't necessarily need to be loaded. Perf Matters handles that perfectly. What Perf Matters also does quite nice, it deletes all the cruft that you don't necessarily need to load, as well as it helps you in preloading and pre-DNS fetching, so it speeds up stuff right before it actually starts to load your full HTML document. So Perf Matters absolutely is a plugin I would recommend, but it's not a
Perf Matters is more about like the optimizations around caching and like CSS optimization and things like that.
Yeah.
So critical CSS is also a part of it, which you said. Okay. So there's a question about, does the invalidation happen automatically, or do I have to make some setting? Generally, all the caching plugin which I have seen so far, which is embedded inside WordPress, somewhat handles that automatically, right? When a page is updated on a post. Okay.
Yeah. So,
but not like entirely 100%, right there.
No, so if you have the assumption that if you have turned on a caching plugin, then that any URL on your page, on your site, is going to be fully cached, and every single visitor is going to see just that fully cached version. That is an assumption that is incorrect. And if it is incorrect, and we can debate about whether you have a cache hit ratio of 40%, 80%, 90%, sure. We can talk about you are from a different region, I'm from a different region. Are we hitting the same things in between? And are we indeed seeing the same cached version? All of those things. But the assumption being disproven that you're always seeing a cached version means you have to prepare your site for uncached versions. And one of the best metrics to look at this, for instance, is the time to first byte. If your time to first byte is low, which means literally from the moment you hit enter in the address bar, you hit enter, that is the moment your browser starts to look for the rendering of the URL you just requested, right? So how long does it take for the browser to actually show the beginnings of the buildup of your page? And we're talking milliseconds here, right? But if you have a time to first byte that's under 100 milliseconds, that's a perfect example of whether you're cached or uncached, you're going to be fine. If it's 500 milliseconds, probably you need to worry a little bit about what's going on here. If your time to first byte is more than a second, you have a problem, because that means your computer doesn't start thinking about rendering the page.
So there is not even like a single byte which my browser has received from the server.
Correct.
And
It's
the
waiting.
browser has zero idea about what the content is going to be, and you're just waiting, basically.
That is the measurement of time to first byte. It's your browser waiting for, what am I going to show?
Right.
So that's the thing that you'll want to test for. And we'll later in this webinar, we'll show you where you can find that, how you can play with that, so you get a better idea of what that time to first byte is. A lot of focus of time to first byte can also be found in any measuring type of performance measuring tool you find out there, right? Because it's time to first byte is a good example of, if that's slow, then everything else is correlated into more slowness. Everything depends on that. It's the time to first byte for your first the page itself, but then the assets in there, if everything is slowed down in how it's loaded, that is also requiring your computer to do work. So it's an incredibly important one to focus on with a lot of attention. It's also a very big part of the core Web Vitals.
Oh, TTFB is also the part of the calculation of CWP scores. CWB scores. Okay, gotcha. So what other metrics should we talk about? And I have just pasted the tool which I use. I don't know if you use the preferred tool. Speed Vitals TTFB test is what I use, and it basically does a TTFB test from around the world, and also shows cache hit and cache miss ticks. So that's very helpful.
That's a great solution. My favorite is Scanfully, which is what we're building to do these types of performance tests. But the idea is that you use more than one thing to make sure that what you're seeing is actually performant.
Yeah.
Is it fast
Generally,
enough?
yeah, it is good to have an arsenal of tools. Yes.
I think anyone working in web development is bound to realize that what they're basically doing is collecting web tools, whether that is your local development environment or stuff happening in the browser or physical tools that you're using.
And we love it, right?
Look, if it wasn't for the fact that my entire knowledge needs to be refreshed every 6 months, I wouldn't be doing this for 20 years. So
100%. Yeah.
It's as simple as but yeah, so that focus needs to be one of the highest. And we can look at the LCP, the largest contentful paint, which is part of the core Web Vitals as well. We can look at first contentful paint. Same thing. They're all important because they're all indicators of how fast your site will load and how fast it will present itself. That whole, let me think of all the things to measure the performance. I think core Web Vitals are a great example of anything that metric tells you on all of the 5 submetrics, and then all the things listed under those 5 submetrics, and it's a long list of things that it looks at. That's a great thing to have as a very strong focus on, okay, this is what it means for someone optimizing their site. Like, this is what it means to, here's what I focus on. I will say this, core Web Vitals are for many people are it's being looked at this is the thing that determines how fast my site loads. That's not entirely the case, because this is not real user measurement. This is laboratory, difficult word on a Thursday.
Lab is fine. Yeah.
Lab, there you go. This is a lab measurement, meaning it's just looking at it from a perfect stand. And if I dial in on a 56K6 baud modem, I'm going to see a very different world in terms of on your broadband. And even from broadband 25 Mbit, 1000 Mbit, you're going to see different ways of how a site is being
But
loaded.
doesn't Google show real world score as well?
In their CRUX reports,
Right.
yes.
Mhm.
Yeah, but you need to look at that that site for that CRUX, but that's not part of measuring your core web vitals. It's just not.
Okay. So
That's the
so
lab test basically.
so let's say it means generally clients means as an agency owner, right? I know Core Web Vitals is just one part of the equation.
Yeah.
But the clients may ask for it. Give me 95 plus score in page speed insights or whatever.
Yeah.
And then LCP is like one of the cruelest kind of metric to get right to. It's always like greater than 2 seconds. It's most of the WordPress site. I should not say we are in WordPress space, but yeah.
Yeah.
So but why, how to solve that? Means what is LCP?
So LCP stands for largest contentful paint, and it's basically the first big thing that is being loaded that's part of your site. For most of the sites, it's something in the hero of the site. It's a featured image. It's whatever is happening in the header part. All of these things can be the LCP. And it basically means you want the most optimized version of the file you're loading. So if it's an image or a video or whatever, you want the most optimized version to load. And secondly, you'll want to think about the sequence of loading. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to first load the biggest thing, because your browser is basically in wait mode and goes like, okay, let me download this first, and then I will continue to render the rest of your page. So it basically means you need to think about how you're loading, what you're loading, and then the sequence of how you're loading assets. And the assets can be literally, it can be a CSS file, it can be JavaScript, it can be images, it can be a PDF and a video, anything you can think of. LCP stands for largest contentful paint, David.
Yeah, there's a question around it. And there is also a question around what happens, does that happen if I use shared hosting? So we will cover that. We have a dedicated section around hosting, and shared versus VPS versus managed hosting is something we will cover. And there is like a what from Jake. So
yeah. I don't know what.
Not sure what triggered that. Just to quickly wrap up LCP. Using like a CDN will be helpful for LCP, and like lazy loading. Just like some tips on. You have your own thought process on this is not the right approach, but we want some tips. Okay.
Yeah. So LCP, I think the most important thing here is if you are using a caching plugin and you measure, there's a few settings you have available from either from Perf Matters or WP Rocket or NitroPack. There's some things you can do where you can prioritize the things that need to be loaded. You can prefetch them. You can say, before anything, already load this file because I know we're going to use it and it's going to block the rendering otherwise. So there's ways to think of the preloading where you can. Let's just say this. In the matter of sequence, if you just go from the top of the website to the bottom, and you have your header, you have maybe your hero, then you have content of any kind, and at the bottom you have a footer, and then there's the credits footer at the very bottom. What that does is your browser does divide that, just as you've divided it with the theme you're using. And the thing is, if the LCP is, for instance, in the content and not in the hero and not in the header, but we know it's going to be an issue in the content being loaded because it is the largest. It makes sense to say to the browser, you know what, before you start rendering the content, here's the header, here's the hero. Well, right before that, so before the header, why don't you start loading that LCP thing already? Because we know we're going to end up having to load it when you hit rendering the content. Now, mind you, what I'm saying here is milliseconds. Like this is maybe
But I
even
think
less,
every 10 to 50 milliseconds saved in every step adds up, right?
Exactly,
Um,
exactly.
so that
And
means when you want, yeah, go ahead.
no, I was going to say that the most important thing here is to realize that it's a rendering blocking thing, right? So it means everything else stops until that is fully loaded.
Okay.
So it's not just the milliseconds that it needs to load, which may be longer than normal, sure, but it stops. It's render blocking, meaning the browser is in wait mode, and
Is there a
that's a thing you
tool
want to
where I can see what is being blocking the rendering? Like a,
avoid.
it,
So that's
where-
diving into the core vitals.
okay.
You'll see if you dive into the and you actually click on all the things that it says that it has checked, it'll tell you, it'll show little screenshots where it shows you, for instance, this button is just not working because this and that happening, or you're loading that featured image right there, but here's how it loads in the nanoseconds it leads up to rendering that part. It'll show you in sort of mini screenshots in how far it has to wait before it
And
actually
this is this
render.
only applicable to the viewport of your hero section, for example, or it can happen on the bottom part of the page as
So
well?
it's a sequence thing, right? So if the sequence is the same for mobile as it is for desktop, then the problem you have on desktop will be worse on mobile because it's a smaller thing, but it loads slower. You're just going to have to assume that it loads slower on mobile.
So let me ask you this question another angle, means what are the simple solutions for render unblocking? So you said one is preloading, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But that may increase TTFB a little bit or not. So that's
Not
different.
not in the regard that you should be concerned about it. No.
Okay.
It's
Gotcha.
way more important to focus on, do I have the most optimized version of the thing that I want to load, need to load? So for instance, if you have I don't know, maybe you're loading an image that is presented in 300 by 300 pixels, but if you're loading something that's 1,000 by 1,000, that doesn't make a lot of sense, right? So you want to have something optimized for exactly that size. Then that's what you do.
Right.
If it means if a JavaScript file is the thing that hurts you the most, do you need to load that JavaScript file at that time? Can you maybe do that later? Can you maybe split up that JavaScript for what it needs to do all the way at the top already, and then split it to the stuff that it can wait for once the full page is loaded? That's just a thing. There's no one answer for this. The only thing that I can give as a one answer is you have an optimized path to follow. You have to follow what the results tell you. You click
So
on
it's
them
a
and you
trail.
figure out what
You
it
just
says.
follow the trail and then basically pick up all the
Correct.
clues along the way and then keep solving
Correct.
them, right?
And in all of the cases, certainly when you're testing with Google Lighthouse for the core Web Vitals, in all of the cases where a test has been done, there's a help function. And that help function leads to an article on web.dev. And they go into deep mode explaining you why this is happening. And if that,
Or I can just install a caching plugin
yeah, well,
and
it'll help you. It'll help you optimize what you can optimize. But I was trying to say that if the help text at that web.dev article or anywhere else when you're doing performance optimizations, if that help text doesn't really help you, paste it into your favorite chat AI version and essentially ask it to simplify it for you, give it other examples than what is being displayed there. So this is one of the things we're not talking AI, but this is how I use AI. If it's not fully clear, let me have AI explain it to me in 4 or 5 different ways, see if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that's good use of AI. There's a question that we used to load 2x images of an
Yeah.
image, and I think that has been overridden by ImageSet, right? A lot of caching plugin can create these different image set for you.
I don't think caching plugins necessarily do this, but this is a very
Sorry, image optimization plugin I meant.
Yeah. Image optimization can help you render optimized versions of your images. Yes. You'll still want to optimize all the different sizes as you need to. And that means in this particular question's case, are the days over? No, they're not. You still need to accommodate for all the different image sizes you want to see in the browser. But this is a seemingly simple thing to solve, but in reality, it's quite complex to solve it perfectly, because you want to have all the optimized versions for every single type of version of every single version of that image that you're going to load. There's a lot that comes in play there.
Yeah, I think Jake makes a valid point. A lot of plugins are made. I'll say means speed is not their first priority, right? Means you have what good is a cache plugin when you need a cache plugin? Means you should ideally not need a cache plugin.
That should be the position you work from. Yes.
All right, so let's go to the next topic. I guess we are going around in one single topic. I know, as we talked in our pre-prep call, that every topic is like an hour long at least.
Yeah, we can easily spend an hour long. I would like to answer Daniel's last question, if you can share that one.
Daniel, okay, yeah, go ahead.
Which image optimization service software process do you recommend? He's tested Cloudflare image service, and it's very neat. That is actually the one I would recommend in the scenarios where that's a possibility. Second option would be there's quite a few server configurations where there's image optimization software running as well, which you may need to tie into some CLI, some Bash scripting. It's very technical, but it's a better version. And then lastly, there's the one that I will use if none of the other ones are available or within budget, is Imagify.
Yeah, Imagify is a good one. We have used Bunny image optimizer as well. So when you route people,
I have no experience with them.
When you route your traffic with Bunny, they have extra add-on of optimization where it converts WebP on the fly, and then it does all the source set and all of that.
So it's quite similar to how Cloudflare does things, right? So
exactly.
The reason why Cloudflare works really good is it does it before.
Same. All the CDN works same. Bunny also works in the same scenario.
It happens before the service actually invoked. So Cloudflare generates WebP or whatever.
There was an important discovery so we were struggling with LCP on instawp.com main site, and no matter what optimization we'll do, it won't come down. And then we realized that it is hosted on our own service, which is InstaWP Live, and we offered CDN baked in. So if you point A records to us, it's like Cloudflare bundled in, right? So if you point your A records to us, it will route through the CDN, 27 POPs around the world. And when you use a caching plugin, and in the caching plugin, if you put a CDN.com or CDN URL, before rendering, it will replace all your images and static assets with a CDN URL. That replace operation itself takes a lot of time.
One?
Yeah. Yes. So we removed the CDN replacement thing, and since we already offer CDN as a part of our hosting, the LCP just dropped. right?
Yep.
I know you don't believe it, but the Google SEO score was affected.
Oh, so the Google score is affected for sure. But this is one of those things, right? If you dive into what the metric tells you, something's wrong here, you need to look at the whole thing happening to that asset. And if there's a rewrite for the URL to the CDN version, that's something happening to that asset. It's a wonderful example of things you wouldn't think of are happening to that asset, but they are.
Yeah, definitely. There are a lot of questions coming in. I think we should just focus on the questions more.
I'm answering what I can. So
yeah, let's keep going as well at the same time. So we have FCP. Do you want to conceive? Do you want to consider FCP for this conversation, or go to the next one?
I think it's part of the LCP. The principle that works for LCP works for FCP. It's the same base principle. Hunt down whatever is happening to that asset and fix whatever the suggestion tell you in the direction where you need to fix it. It's I'm answering Jake's question. If is Imagify less performant than CLI approach? So Imagify is a third-party service, so it means it's offloaded, and that in essence makes it slower and less performant. Yes, ideally something happens on the server that'll be faster, and in the most ideal scenario, something happens before the server that is the fastest.
So so we talked about layers, right? So let's just basically list them out. So first, when the user hits the site, do you want to list it from that angle or from the server angle?
So this is the multiple layers that we have is for most people is brought back to I have the web server and I have my browser. And sure, the web server has its application.
So those are two layers,
but it actually is,
sure, right?
Yeah, so that's but that's in reality it's already three because the application itself is also already doing something. But let's start at the top. So the moment you hit enter in that browser for the URL you are requesting, the first thing it's going to do, it's going to be processed by what we're now calling the edge. This has nothing to do with the U2 guitarist. This is the edge of what your actual website is. That means if there is a service such as Bunny CDN or Cloudflare that processes your traffic, they are doing that at the edge. They are doing that before your web server has to do anything. So that's the first layer.
So as a part of edge, we can consider Cloudflare, Bunny, and CDNs, right?
Yeah.
And of course, there are like advanced edge workers thingy, which may be an advanced topic, but they can also do edge related stuff.
There's a lot of stuff you can do at the edge. If you're using a CDN, it may not do your full site at the edge, but it may just do the assets at the edge.
So that is JavaScript, CSS, images, things
correct.
Like that.
Okay. Yeah. So when you then basically go to the next level, there is the next level will be your server is being asked to produce something, and whatever caching you have going on at the server level is then invoked, and that means there's a performance thing that you can start doing there. So your server will produce ideally some version of page caching. In the most ideal version, that page caching is offloaded to the edge. But again, that depends on the exact solution you have in play.
We do that, by the way, on InstaWP Live. We do full page caching on the edge.
Exactly. And that's, in my opinion, how it should be. That is the best way to, because not only is the edge in front of it, but it's all over the world. And it's not just your one location, right? It's synced between all the data centers of that edge caching.
Yeah, and it's difficult to invalidate cache also in that case, right? So you have to signal.
It's a little more complicated, yeah.
It is, yeah. But we do that very well. So on the server side, we have page cache. Then I think Jake has listed out some clues for us. So there is object cache. What is object cache?
So page cache we touched. Object cache is whatever's being requested from the database is in one way or another can be called an object. Now, if you're visiting the same page as I'm visiting, it doesn't make a lot of sense for the server to retrieve that particular object twice. So you want to have that object cached. That's what the object cache
So
layer does.
that's the layer between the application and the database.
Correct.
And the auto loading of things helps
Yeah.
there a
Yeah.
lot,
So
right?
the options that are being loaded, all the little things that you're not aware of what's being stored in your database to render the actual URL that's being requested, all of those things can be objects or objects within objects.
So what type of like website requires an object caching? Does every site require object caching, or those who have like a larger read write to database?
It is usually, we usually reserve proper object caching for database heavy sites. And that is
Like
for
an e-commerce.
an e-commerce is a good one, a membership site,
Gotcha.
any site that's a publishing site that has a lot of commenters and stuff like that. You'll want to optimize object cache as much as you can. And the next layer, as in introducing a better version of it, is the plugin Object Cache Pro by Thiel Kruis, which is the best solution to combine on the server side Redis with Object Cache Pro plugin inside your WordPress application. So that's a good way to optimize that layer. There's a lot of stuff. So to continue with Jake's sequence, there's a little bit in between the database and the files, and certainly the repeat. But there's optimizations you can do on the database side of things. There's optimizations you can do inside the code where you're looking at, am I being secure? Because insecure obviously means oftentimes there's an impact to performance as well. Am I being the most performant here? Am I doing the smartest? All of those things on the code side of things always also come into play. You have a principle called fragment caching. Fragment caching means there's certain parts that on the HTML document we don't need to render all the time. The simplest way to think of this is, for instance, if you have a menu and that menu is loaded on every single page, it isn't necessarily needed that menu is being rendered all the time. So what
It's
could
like
you
a
do?
single page application kind of scenario.
No, just any. Let's say you have a sidebar menu loaded on your shop. Instead of doing the request for that menu on every single page load, you can say, look, it's fine if I do this request once a day, fragment cache it in a transient, and just query for the transient, and then render the transient, and then 24 hours I do a new request just to make sure. And obviously if something changes in that thing, you invalidate the transient. There's a lot of stuff you can play, but transient cache is something not being used a lot by a lot of people, but it's one of those things that just makes it a lot smarter.
We use it in some fashion in the staging plugin which we have. So basically transients are, I think, WordPress's biggest gift to a developer, right? Means you can use it. Like,
the transients API is one of the APIs you need to get really familiar
just one of the easiest also.
It's super easy.
And you can just click clear, and without any problem, it will clear. And then, so at InstaWP Live, so caching layer wise, we do edge caching, we talked about. We do object caching using Memcache, not Redis. So you don't need extra plugin from anybody. And we also do the page caching, which is advanced desk cache.php in WordPress. So that's like the full page caching. But yeah, so I think from an agency or developer perspective, we should think about all these layers. I think we did not talk about browser caching. So there is also stuff which you can cache on the browser once the website is like loaded for the first time.
So we have limited control over it other than setting our cache directives. So we can tell the browser, here's something you downloaded and you can just store this for 7 days, 30 days, a year. But that's about the extent of it, right? So how the browser treats it and how persistent its cache is, we have less control over that. But browser caching is, I treat it more as if it's the assets, sure, then use that to your best advantage. But don't go into very different types of configurations where you want to optimize it to the extreme, because you'll run into issues. Not all browsers do browser caching the exact same way. Certainly not on the cache invalidation side of things. But yes, browsers cache, and some browsers do it annoyingly well.
Right.
I'm sure we've all seen that we needed to refresh a certain redirect in Chrome, and we just couldn't get rid of it. It's still there.
Not possible. You have to
Reboot.
use incognito.
Exactly, it's still there. That's browser cache, but
take rebirth basically.
Yeah,
respawn. All right. So I think we have talked about caching a lot and overall speed. You wanted to cover anything else before we move into security?
No, I think we've touched on all the layers.
There's a question about cache warming. I know there are some plugins like Flying Press and Rocket.
Yeah.
They pre-cache a lot of URLs. Is that a good idea?
In general,
it goes back to our caching discussion earlier.
Yeah, and generally it's a good idea to do cache preloading. The downside of it is if you have a large site with a lot of URLs, this can actually become a too big of a task to handle proper. So in general, yes, it's a good idea, but do it with caution is what I'm saying.
One quick kind of insert about, so we recently released site management toolset using our WordPress plugin. So you just install the plugin. It's a free feature. And in our dashboard, you can click on Purge Cache, and it purges all the caches of various plugins. So we support 50 plus plugin vendors, because purging cache itself is a big challenge in WordPress, because you purge one and then you forget others, right? And then you have Cloudflare. So for Cloudflare and Bunny kind of CDNs, they have their individual WordPress plugins, and which you can install and configure. So that we will be able to trigger, so that you are purging your CDN cache, your object cache, your page cache, right? So that's not bad.
So the downside of all the layers of caching is that indeed you have all of these layers that you need to take care of, plus you have it over the different service providers and the servant plugin and all that. So it quickly becomes a very complicated
sad reality of our world.
Yeah. But it's
All right, so let's shift a little bit of gears and go into security, which is also equally important. What is security, and does security means what is the effect of having an insecure site? That's a dummy question.
An insecure site means that you are vulnerable in any way you can imagine having to do with your domain. Meaning, worst case, they take over the entire domain. And I do mean on the domain hosting level, not on the web server level. So there's different ways of looking at worst case scenarios, but the absolute worst is you lose full control over your domain registration, as well as everything that's happening on your domain. I've seen cases where the actual access to the control panel was actually granted, and then if domain registration happens in the same control panel, you're basically screwed. But defacing, losing trust, all of these things are on the face of it equally bad. You just want the most secure version of your web application. Now, what we discussed with performance and all the different layers of caching that we have to our availability, the same thing we can draw a parallel to security here as well, because security is not just turning on a plugin. Security means,
I was about to ask that.
Yeah, I saw it burning in your mind. Like, can you please explain?
Can I just install a plugin?
Yeah, you can, and it most certainly will take care of a good portion of your security, but it's a good portion. It's not your full security. So if we treat it in the same way...
What can it take care of? Let's talk about those things.
What it cannot, I think it's easier to say what it cannot. What it cannot do, it cannot stop traffic before it hits your server. So a web
That's a
application
fair point.
firewall, again, with Cloudflare, perfect example. Whatever Cloudflare filters away, it doesn't even touch my server, which is a
Right.
direct positive consequence on the resources used by my server, and I'm thus more performant. So whatever I can stop before it hits my server, I'm going to take. So a web application firewall at the edge is the first layer. Once traffic hits my site, it is the web server that serves my site, my application. So the web application on the server. What does InstaWP use for this?
We have our WAF layer, which like protects
Fail-
this.
Yeah, so fail to ban is, for instance, a very popular module. But there's
Fail to ban is also installed. Yes.
yeah. So that
For
means
brute for protection, right?
Exactly. So the traffic that is stopped at the server level, meaning the traffic doesn't actually hit the application. Once it hits the application, in this case, application is WordPress, then there's a whole bunch of stuff that we can do to WordPress to make it more secure. Adding two-factor authentication is a very obvious thing to do. There's a whole bunch of stuff that you can do that has to do with rate limiting. So when somebody bypasses the edge cache, the server cache, cache, I'm still in caching mode.
Server security,
The security layer on the edge, then the security on the server, and then gets to touch the application. If somebody hammers on the login file, that doesn't make any sense. Nobody does that naturally. So this is a bot. This is something you want to block. Security plugins in general are more in that arena really good. So 2FA, as well as whatever they can block somebody trying to get into the application. I'm not personally a fan of a firewall sitting inside the application because, mind you, I'm performance minded. That means every single attempt being done to log into your site, and I need to load a security plugin to do that, and to do that mitigation is a wasted resource, and it slows down my site. So that doesn't make any sense for me to do that on that layer. That said, there are plugins that do this better than others, but the general principle should be, if I can offload it to the edge, I can, I should, I must.
Right.
So
it is more about performance concern because it adds a layer of processing.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fair.
But it's also the smarter thing to do because a plugin, so it's basically an application within your WordPress application. That principle doesn't make a lot of sense. So the smart thing here is to think about, where do I do which makes the most sense? So Paul asks a wonderful question, which I hear all the time. How good is the technique of changing the default login? He does a fair amount. So the logic is, you can't pick a lock if you don't know where it is. That said, it's quite easy for bots to figure out where to be. If they really want to get in, they'll get in. That said, I don't believe in obfuscation as a means of security, and this is obfuscation. So you're kind of kidding yourself. The much more important thing here is to realize that a lot of the hacks that you see happening are more related to somebody taking over your session, meaning you are logged in. Your cookies that say I am logged in, they can be hijacked by, for instance, browser extensions that are just sniffing about and just copying
or
stuff.
like a compromised plugin which may have run something.
Compromised plugin, a compromised Chrome extension, a compromised website you visited that did stuff that it's not supposed to. There's a whole bunch of things. This is why it's important, if your Windows machine, your Mac OS, your iOS, any of the devices that you use says there's a update, I highly suggest you update, because this is one of the things that are being mitigated constantly. We call that man-in-the-middle attacks. We mean someone sits in the middle and listens into what's happening to you. I've seen people being hacked that turned out that their local machine was hacked. Somebody was listening in onto every single traffic stuff that was happening on their site, key logging, all of these things. So every single time they changed the password, the cookie was sniffed away again, and somebody just got access again, and then defaced it.
So
Added.
those are the things which are like out of control of even for the WordPress. This is like a general security practice.
It's a general
Uh,
security practice, but it's relatively easy to do, because if you work with sessions, if you say, if you know, there's plugins that allow you to change the cookie session of your WordPress application.
yeah.
Generally not a good idea. You want to keep that short. You want to make sure that you're not logged in after a day.
Yeah, and then I think there are plugins which will log you out
Yep.
after
Yep.
shorten the amount of session. Okay, and one quick tidbit of fun fact: uh, my entry into the WordPress ecosystem as a plugin seller. I do also have another company called Express Tech where we sell plugins. So the entry into that was Hide My WP, which
Yep.
was a top
Yep.
seller in Code Canyon. So I acquired that plugin, I think 4 or 5 years ago, and I sold it a couple of years ago. And that was an awful piece of software. I should not say that out loud, but it was not that good. But there, there were other alternatives right now. I think WPS Hide, and there is a clone Hide My WP Ghost or something. But again,
Yeah.
I totally agree with you. It's just
It's
like an
obfuscation.
obfuscation.
You're
It's
not
not
actually solving. Yeah, your video lagged there for me. Oh, there you are.
Yeah.
So yeah, it just hides something, and there's other ways of finding out what it is you're hiding. So
100%.
better put
100%.
your effort into making sure you have a web application firewall in front of everything. Better to make sure that you are using two-factor authentication, passkeys, all that sort of stuff. That's way more important to focus on. Make sure you're looking at sessions and whatnot. I do want to highlight one specific plugin which I think is not getting enough attention. It's a high-end security plugin, but it basically does everything right, and that's Fortress by Snicko.
Yep. That's a good one.
That is
But
just
can you
has
just simply install it, or it has to be enabled by your hosting company?
Ideally, your hosting company has this taken care of.
Right.
But I'll drop it in the chats for those looking into what I consider to be the best security solution. But it's for anybody who has the budget and where it makes sense. But you have to treat performance and security from a multi-level perspective. You can't just go in and first of all just turn on the plugin, because it's only a half solution you have. You need to consider all the layers that you can possibly think of and mitigate for that. Now, if you just have a presentation site and there's not a lot of stuff going on, there's no purchases, no e-commerce and whatnot, you may be tricked into thinking, do I really need to spend this much time into this? Do I really need to be doing all these things? Yes, because it's ultimately you who are going to have to fix the problem of your site being hacked or abused or spam links injected, all of those things. The matter of solution that you use is basically more, you think of the matter of what you end up using is the best version of your website that you can produce. That should be your base thought. That's security, that's performance, that's also a whole bunch of other stuff, accessibility. But there's no underlayer of things other than make sure you cover all layers. That's
okay. One quick question means most of the time means we see that there is a security bug in a plugin, and then we forgot to update that plugin on on our website. So how are updates important to security, and how often one should update? Should we put that on auto update all the time?
so auto update works from the principle that it's stable enough. You can assume that the auto update is not borking your site. But to answer your question, I check updates every single day. I do that for my clients. That's what you pay me for. If I have a site in maintenance, that is what I do. Some of those sites have auto updates turned on for some of the plugins. Some of the really small sites have it turned on by default. But that's because it's super easy for me to mitigate if something goes wrong. So it's not a complex site. Rarely anything changes over a course of a few months. That's a matter of level that you need to think about.
Gotcha.
But in general, you kind of do what makes the most sense. And in my case, the vast majority of my sites are in version control, so that means I check every single day if there's stuff that's going on. This is something we're going to implement with Scanfully as well, where we'll have as real-time security monitoring for updates for plugins as we possibly can, because it's just that important. We saw the uprise last year of more and more security-related stuff was found in plugins, in WordPress, in server-level applications and PHP and all of these things. It constantly is happening. This is only going to go more up and up and up as we're hitting more clever AIs, because script kiddies, as they're called.
Yeah, you can just download the entire WordPress.org and find security vulnerabilities using AI, right?
Yeah.
And I think a great company there is PatchStack, which is doing a lot of work there.
PatchStack is a wonderful plugin solution. I highly recommend you check them out as well. Yeah.
And they have like a virtual patching, which can patch 0 days for you.
Yeah.
The vulnerabilities, which in case you forgot to update, or even the plugin vendors, they don't have an update.
Yeah, they basically solve a security issue with the plugin you have installed on your WordPress site before the plugin is actually updated. So they have, as soon as the security is found, the security issues found, they mitigate it, and that's a wonderful way to make sure that you are in a more secure and safe version of your entire installation.
I think Hans also raises a great point that hosting companies which do that proactively, blocking 0-day attacks on server level, because they can do it via the WAF layer or the. I think we should think about adding this to InstaWP as well as the layer. One of the things which we do is scheduled updates for sites. So you can schedule like every Saturday, update all my sites. And now we will combine the power of visual regression, where we will test the homepage is broken or not. And then we can tell you. So that's under the site management tool set. By the way, we would love to integrate Scanfully into the tool set for continuous monitoring someday.
We have 2 big features coming, probably around the summertime. I think it'll be a lot more interesting then.
Awesome. I think we should shift gears a lot. We are in the 1 hour mark already.
Yep.
Do you want to PatchStack? Okay, so they are asking for the name of the company and check out the plugin which we have, and I think they're also asking for Scanfully, so check them out. So let's switch into a little bit of a demo mode and show them demos, and we will see if we can cover more stuff or can have a follow-up webinar someday. All right, Ramkus, over to you.
Yeah. So one of the things that I wanted to show is go to the present here, is there's a few interesting things we can do on the command line, and that is something I think is good for you to check, because there are, for those of you who don't know, there is a thing called WP CLI, command line interface. And
is that enabled by default on all hosting companies, or
the
not?
good ones?
Or
the good ones, yes.
Like
I
us?
think I know you have it. I know you have it.
Yeah, I'm just kidding. But if you don't have it on, say, even the not so good one, or they forgot to add it, let's put it that way. So can you download it and then use it?
You can. Yeah. If you Google for WP CLI, you'll find an installation manual, so you can basically install it on any server where
it's
you're
just
hosting.
a PHP file, right? In FAR format.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's an interpreter of PHP, but then basically it is your WordPress, but then just on the command line. And one of the interesting thing about WP CLI, there's libraries that extend its functionality, and there's two that I
So
want
today we are
to.
not talking about like generic WP CLI commands. This is more
Correct.
advanced
Two,
mode
two very specific
for
ones.
from a WordPress philosopher to
Yeah.
everybody else. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, WordPress Jesus, go for it.
Maybe that's a little bit too much honor.
Sorry for that.
Now, for some reason, my screen is not responding. So
Oh man.
there we go. See?
Yeah, it's the SSH connection was idle
I
for a long time.
Yeah, I keep it open, but never mind. So profile, that is the most interesting one, because what it does.
Just to stop you again, you need to
Yep.
install the profile command on top of the existing WP CLI command. And if
Correct.
you Google for WP CLI profile, they will give you one-liner installation command, just for everybody who don't know.
Yes. Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. But once you hit WP and you type in profile, you're in the root of your site. So the location that I'm in with my prompt. Hold on, I that's a good one, because I needed to do this again. One of the things I use a lot to sort of gauge what's going on with my site is the command profile, and specifically the stage. And what it does, and I'll just paste the command in as in the total command. I will check for an overview of each stage of the load process. So once I hit enter, it'll tell me perfectly what's happening in general on my site. So the Bootstrap, it takes 19 milliseconds. Main query, I don't even know how to pronounce 43,000. What is it?
Almost zero. Let's say negligible.
Almost zero. And the template rendering is a little over 100 milliseconds. So 0.1 second. So the cache ratio tells me how much of this was optimized. And in total, I'm spending 321.3 of a second in loading time. So a little over 300 milliseconds, which is perfectly agreeable for rendering.
Is that my TTFP, or will there be a round trip time added to TTFP on top of this?
No, this is including TTFB.
Okay.
So this is,
but
this
then
is all,
but when a user accesses my website, there will be the delay of the time delay which will be added to this, right? On top of
correct. Correct.
So this will tell me on which stage is my site basically not working properly.
It will tell me the time it needs to spend doing things. So for instance, the second version that I'm showing, so the first one, I'm just looking at the command stage, and particularly I'm looking at fields, time, and cache ratio. The second command I just used is the stage Bootstrap. So I'm looking at.
So now you're diving deep into the Bootstrap stage?
Yeah. So now I'm looking at, these are the hooks that are being used to render my site. It's as simple as that. And this tells me, basically this tells me everything is okay, because the total site rendering here is 200 milliseconds. And everything starting with 0 is basically okay. Certainly something that starts with 0.0, that means it's just, this is super fast.
What would have been a not okay case, like plugin loaded taking like 1.5 seconds, say?
Yeah.
What does that mean? Means that like one of the plugins is taking a lot of time to load?
Correct. So let's assume this hook. This is a hook where plugins are they're essentially loaded. So every single plugin is loaded at this stage. And this tells me something, that if I look at the performance and I'm trying to figure out why my site is low, why my time to first byte may be fast, but then the rendering of the site takes forever, that means I have way too many plugins activated. And not that the amount of plugins is a problem. It's not. It never has been. But specifically, what this means is that whatever plugins I have, and this can be just 2 or 3 plugins, but whatever plugins that I have, they are taking just way too much time to do the things they need to do.
Right.
And that's the thing you want to figure out. So the bootstrapping, it basically means the loading of the site, right? So I'm processing the things my WordPress application tells me to load. So that's my theme, that's my plugins, that's my MU plugins. It's all of those things. Everything that needs to load hooks into things, and in those hooks it hooks into. That's what we're calling the bootstrap process.
So basically, the WordPress setup and init hooks,
Yep.
and the main query is transforming request to WP query, and the template is determining and rendering template. So in layman term, Bootstrap is the setup part. Main query is the database query, probably.
Yep, correct.
And the template is the last part where it renders. Why couldn't they just choose like normal words for it?
Well, in a way they are.
Yeah, not for
But
us.
yeah, it has to do with there's certain processes that you start inventing as you're building these applications that you need words for. Bootstrapping, I mean, it's strapping on your boots. It's where you start.
Yep.
If you want to walk,
totally get your point. No need to explain. It was a silly question. Please,
Oh, I
please
know.
proceed.
So WP Profile is a wonderful extension that helps you figure out on a very granular level. And I get it. If the command line scares you a little bit, I understand it, right? First time I touched it, I was like, what am I doing? But there's not much you can break just by using the commands.
And is it good like to copy paste like a cheat sheet of yourself and then having like a bunch of commands which you run?
Yes. Right? Yes, absolutely. In fact, I highly recommend you do that. If I'm going to stop sharing my screen and show you the. There you go. So this is the profile subcommand for WP CLI, which is the page you see here. As you can tell, this is part of the WordPress developer resources. So developer.wordpress.org/CLI/commands/profile. This means this is maintained by WordPress.org. And here you can see the examples that I used. It's the same examples that are listed here. And it'll tell you perfectly what makes sense. So whenever you see something slowing down beyond your comprehension, like I'm doing everything I can, I have all the cachings turned on, and yet it's still slow. This gives you an idea of where to kind of look. I will say using Query Monitor is the next step, but that's not an hour worth of talk. That's an entire day to talk about what Query Monitor, the plugin, what it allows you to do in total. But this gives you a good idea of, what's going on here. Why are certain things happening? My second favorite WP CLI solution is this one that is called Doctor. And the Doctor command is basically a diagnose all my problems via a whole bunch of checks that it does. If I scroll down, here's an interesting one I like doing. This is the, let me see. So this one I like doing because it gives me an idea of all the checks that I can do. I'm switching back to the terminal now. So that means clicking a few more times. Apologies for that.
By the way, Jake says that he's ready for that day of Query Monitor and he offers a paid session. So yeah.
Well, it's one of the things
you
I'm
can't
going.
Hire Jesus. You can't hire Jesus. No. Just kidding.
It's one of the things I'm going to start addressing way more on my YouTube channel, using all of these tools, including
I think you
query
should
and
just take like a real use case, real world use case, and like go through steps of solving it. That will give a lot of people like, yeah.
um, the command I just typed in is WP Doctor list, and what that command does is it basically list the checks to run. So
Hmm.
this is a good example of what are the things you would want to make sure that are good on your WordPress site. So for instance, is the auto load option size that shouldn't be above 900 kilobytes, because that's the thing that needs to be loaded on every single page load. Not good. It'll tell you if your core verified checksum is up to par, meaning
That's awesome. Hmm.
are you running a valid version of WordPress? And when I say valid, I mean unhacked, no malware in there, all of those things. File
Just
eval.
just a side note, a lot of hosting companies, I know we don't have we don't have a lot of time to talk about hosting companies, but a lot of proper managed hosting company like us, including Kinsta, Rocket.net, and others, they offer read-only core. So even though the hackers are inside your WordPress site, they are unable to modify any core files. So that
Yeah,
helps a lot.
yeah, yeah. That's a wonderful feature to have. But as you can see here, there's a whole bunch of things that this doctor command allows you to do. And I'm going to run them now on this particular site. As you can see, it's running the checks. We're at 12:43. There we go. And what you see here is everything that's worth knowing. So the core verified checksums, that's good. File eval, this is an indication if there's base 64D code, that's an indication you have hacked software, because it basically allows the hacker to obfuscate whatever they're doing. You actually never want to use this. It has a warning, and that's because WP cache flush is detected, and that's something that in this particular case I know it's not a problem, but it's something you want to know. Auto load option size, here it is again, it's success. Why? Because it's only 203 kilobytes, which is less than 900. What you'll see on sites that have had a bunch of plugins installed and maybe deleted, and it's older, and lots of stuff going on, if the auto load option size is just over a megabyte, then you will have a slow site. There's just not a way to work around that. Cron count, in this particular case, this is absolutely correct that there's an error, because cron is turned off inside WordPress. It's been moved to the server. That's a more performant way, but cron count doesn't actually work in this case.
Yeah.
So that's good. I left some plugins unupdated, and it'll tell you there's 3 plugins that have updates available. Okay, theme is up to date.
Today you have a little bit more work to do. Update.
My day's not done yet. No. This is a good one. Let me check for. This is a security version. So I like Doctor as the command because it does security.
Which is amazing, man. It gives you a bunch of things. These are all the checks it can do, and amazing.
Yeah, and what it says here, PHP files detected in the uploads folder. Now, in my case, I know the site that I'm testing this on, and I know this is not a problem. But in general, you'll kind of want to know if there's a PHP file in your uploads, because it's rarely the intended thing, right? Uploads is assets. That's PDFs, images, MP3s, MP4s, whatever you like, just not PHP files, because then that means they can be executed. In my case, it's a file that says there's nothing for you to see here. It's a security thing, but that's the thing you want to make sure that you want to run every now and then. So yeah, that's the most important thing that I wanted to show on WP CLI. There's one more other thing I'd like to show you, and I need to switch to a different screen for that, and that is the browser inspect element. I'm going to look at this particular site. I'm sure you've seen it before. If you haven't recently, there's a new design. So
Which is awesome.
Yep, it's quite nice. You can't see what I'm doing right now, but I'm right-clicking my mouse on just anywhere and hitting the inspect menu. In this my particular case, I'm running Brave, and Brave is Chromium-based, so it basically works the same as Chrome itself or Edge. And I hit inspect, and what it shows me is this. And I'm sure if you've ever clicked on inspect, this is something you've seen before, right? So I have my ways to look at whether I'm at the desktop or another device. What a lot of people do is check out the CSS and play with it and see and figure out and whatnot. But I'd like to show one particular tab that is being just never used by a great many of people, and that is the network tab. You might think I want to go to the performance. I do. There's also good information here, but I want to show a few things that's happening here on the network tab. And the network tab is the good example we are looking for, because it'll tell me how things are loaded on the particular URL that I'm seeing. So I'm at the URL that I'm looking at is WordPress.org, and you can replicate this yourself. What you see here is what we call the waterfall. So what you can tell here,
that's the one I was asking before, right?
Yeah, and we'll see it in better once we hit reload, because what we're currently seeing is what we have already loaded. Okay. What we want to do is what happens live. Now, you want to disable cache, because we don't want to fool ourselves. We want to make sure that what we're testing.
So this is disabling the browser cache, not any other layer.
Any caching that is available to us, meaning there's also caching happening on other ways that whatever the browser can disable as cache, including browser cache, it will be disabled. Right. If I now hit,
it sends request to the server that send me uncached version, if you can understand my language. Okay.
Correct. Yeah. If I now hit refresh, you'll see a lot more happening. And you'll see that it's uncached, and you'll see there's actually something that took almost 6.5 seconds, which is why my waterfall is looking quite differently now. But I want to focus on the first part here, because the purple part here is, and if it happened too fast, I'll do it again. As you can see, it's loading. And this time, see, again, around the 6.5 seconds. So for 5 seconds, you're seeing the better version of the waterfall.
And then boop, you are into the 6.5 seconds zone.
And then we're into the thing. So there's a lot of stuff that we can find here. But if I click on WordPress.org, that's the actual document I'm requesting, then you can see here in your headers, and I'm not going to click through all of them, but I just want to kind of look at what I see here. So I have the thing that I requested. Normal way is a GET request. That's the address it came from. And I got a 200, which is A-OK. Now, when I look into this, there's a bunch of stuff that I have way more data on. This is data that your browser normally processes. And this is not something you ever need to think about, because, sure, scheme, you may want to know, HTTPS. Yes, I'm looking at the HTTPS version of this site. But cache control, for instance, there's no cache. It'll tell me it has requested a cached or an uncached version. It is these headers, and you've probably heard this refer somewhere. These are your headers that the header information of the document you requested. If I were to say, let's not disable cache and just look for the cached version, and I refreshed, then
And this time it finished. No, it took 6 seconds again.
so something
There
is,
is a last resource which is
yeah,
taking a lot of time.
there's something async loading. But here you can find all the information that will tell you whether something is. See, now cache control says max age is 0. There's now information here in a in a cached version that isn't there in a uncached version. So these are the things that allow you to tell what's going on here in this browser. So hold on, we are loading fonts, we are loading style sheets, and all of them you can see have information. Every single element being loaded, including the GTM. So you may see why this has a red dot. That's because I'm blocking tracking scripts. So this is happening on my machine just because I'm blocking. It's just not loading. You see all these files here that are, in case you didn't know, this is how it's actually being loaded. It's right there. It has block styles. It has all of these things that you've seen on any WordPress site that you have. And all of these files have information points. It'll tell you if it's cached. It'll tell you if stuff was being saved in the right way. It will also tell you if certain files, does it make sense that they are loaded 3 times? And Paul asked the right question there. This is a good thing to be realizing. Why do I need is it the same version though? Let me see.
It may be loading from different file paths though.
Yeah, possible block library. Yeah, so it's, as you can tell, that's the navigation, that's the image, and that's the social link. Okay, so we're good, right? So it allows you to do a little bit more in terms of, and this is the global fonts. Okay, also good. Here's another style, that's CSS. This is actually the build style. Great, no problem. Here's another one. I just want to make sure we're not loading things twice where we don't need to. Okay, so this is the style sheet for the global header footer. This is a wonderful way to debug what's actually being loaded. So you can tell
one more thing which I generally use, sorry to cut you in between, is that when I install a new plugin, means I take like a before and after mental snapshot. Which gives you like, okay, these are the new JS or CSS files the plugin is loading. And so that gives you information, right, for further troubleshooting. These are all information gathering.
Yeah. And if I click on these last file, it is the collect thing being
Google
loaded.
Analytics. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And, you know,
I think that's event, Google sending events to the mothership.
Now, what you didn't see is I fully blocked everything, every single script now that is part of Brave. I can turn certain things on and off. Now you can see the waterfall is limited to 1.5. It means the full site is loaded at 1.5, which is okay. Because what's interesting is that if I say this one, like the actual document, that is loaded within 200 milliseconds, and that's fine. It's not fast, it's not blazingly fast, but it's fast enough. And if I do it again, you'll see uncached, it's slower. So this is a good indication. This waterfall is a good indication of what loads when, and for you to determine, is this stuff that needs to be loaded? Is this stuff that needs to be loaded on this particular page? Does it make sense for this photo to be loaded? Do we need it? Well, obviously we do. Language guess. Do we need that here on this page? I don't know. Maybe in the context of WordPress.org, maybe we do. Fave icon. You know, you can run down all of these files, and there are wonderful ways of going through these tabs. You can see what it is that I have selected. If I go here, it'll tell you this is the actual DOM, right? This is the document that you are. You can see the font
sometimes
file.
sometimes I see that you are loading fonts multiple times from different page builders or same page builder
Yep.
with different add-ons on top of page builder, which is
Yep.
loading the same font file again and again and again.
Yep.
Which then it gives you the troubleshooting thing. Okay, why is it now? You have to ask the questions.
That is one of the reasons you want to be very familiar with whatever is in this network tab. It is one of the tabs that I basically see the vast majority of people entirely ignoring, and yet it's one of the most valuable things we have to our availability. So yeah, that's those are the two things I wanted to share. The fun stuff we can do with CLI in terms of performance and security. We can measure, we can gauge, we can do all of these things with both the profile and the doctor command, and in the inspect element menu, or the dev tools, or whatever you want to call them, you have the ability to do more than just look at the CSS that's being generated.
Right.
On the network tab, all of those are tools that I basically use every single day. Now, my work is more performance and security related than probably most of you, which is fine. Don't everybody jump into this. I need my work, so. But no, but it's a principle of if you don't know what's happening, you don't know what's happening, and then whatever solution you come up with is not going to be a solution for the root cause. And I like to get to the bottom of what is the root cause of the problem and fix the root cause instead of just obfuscation.
Okay, so let's take questions before we end the call. People, if you have any questions, this is the right time. I'm sorry we couldn't cover like more than 50% of our material, which is kind of a good thing because it was an engaging conversation. But yeah, feel free to ask questions. We'll take 5 more because we want to be, we need to be respecting time from all our viewers and as well as Remkes. So Jake asked that, is disabling opinionated plugin resources via functions filters, is that a good approach? Or is there like a better approach through, say, Perf Matters or anything else?
I like the interface of Perf Matters because it gives me more granular control in the UI, but the principle is good.
Okay. So it doesn't matter how you block it, just block it, basically.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of people who fix these types of things in functions.php. I would recommend against that. I would recommend
or use a child theme at the same time.
Yeah, no, same answer. I would recommend you use a site core plugin, so a custom plugin you build for that particular site, and in that plugin, you do all the modifications, things like this. But I'm also thinking, why complicate it for yourself, and why don't just use the Perf Matters plugin in this particular case, because it just solves not just that problem, just a whole bunch of other problems.
Awesome. And then there is another question about optimizing autoload. I know that's a tricky one. There was a plugin by Yoast, right?
Yeah, Yoast has a good plugin. It's AAA-options optimizer, I think. Let me double check. Yeah, I'll share it in the chat. That's a great plugin that is allowing you to optimize whatever's in your options. You can tell it to auto load, yes, no. First it scans, obviously, but then you can tell it to auto load, yes or no, or delete it.
But it is difficult to guess what you want to load and what you don't, right? So that's
I was going to say the vast majority is going to be very difficult to guess, but you got to start somewhere.
You just need to put some AI magic into it, so it automatically selects what to not load.
I think at one point we'll get to an AI integrations plugin that looks on these performance side of things and just kind of knows what it needs to do based on bulk,
rather than like just doing like.
And there might be a startup that kind of has this in mind already as it's building its product. Just saying.
That's interesting. Need to talk to you about that.
Yeah.
So we have So people are saying, great event, got to run. Thank you for sticking with us for 90 minutes. This has been one of the longest webinar we have done, and we are being watched by 246 people, which is amazing. Thank you, everybody, for coming online and sharing your valuable time with us. We have one more question from Shoaib. He says that while discussing object cache, you mentioned about caching specific areas of the slide side menu sidebar. What available tools are there? Is that available for agencies, or is this like a choice of plugin vendors?
There's two ways. You can program yourself with the Transient API, but that means you have access to the theme and the plugin and overrides that you can do.
There's a lot of agencies build their own themes. In that case, they can do that. Right?
Yeah. There's a plugin by Andrei Savchenko, Rarst, that is called Fragment Caching. You can find it on GitHub. And there's also a plugin by Ryan Hellier, and I forgot the name of it, but if you subscribe to my newsletter, I'll send it out tomorrow with the information to both of these solutions, because they're fragment caching. They're great to use. Object caching can be combined with fragment caching, and it's a smart way to do this.
Right. So that's awesome. Jake says, thank you. JB, thank you as well. And Remkes, go ahead and subscribe to, first of all, stop everything, subscribe to WP Jesus, okay? And then we will talk. And do you have a CLI course coming? People are asking for it.
I do, yes. It's been in the work for quite a long period. I was going to release it last year.
Do it, please.
Stuff happened, but yes, I am working on a WP CLI course that doesn't just handle here's how you work with it, but also when you are on the command line, you can use another language called Bash. Inside Bash scripting, you can combine CLI and regular Bash scripting into just really fun types of, it's not programming, but you can combine certain commands and do wonderful stuff with it.
It's like a script where you combine a couple of commands together.
Yeah, from optimizing to checking to doing things that would be quite cumbersome in the in the WordPress dashboard. It's just a smarter way of working with your WordPress site.
And I think with the advent of AI, it's easier than ever to generate WP commands, to script. But the only problem is that when you generate something from AI, there is potential of harming the website if the script is not right.
Which is why you run staging on InstaWP.
Yes, thanks for the shameless plug.
Yeah.
But Val is asking, can they order?
Yeah.
Can they order a performance review?
He has my phone number. He can call me.
And what about others? Do you offer such service, by the way?
I do.
Okay. That's awesome.
If you go to remkesdevries.com, there's a performance audit. There's two versions that I offer. Depending on your use case, that might be of interest to you.
Awesome. That's I didn't know that. So, all right. So we have Bud as well. Seriously, Bud. So
seriously, man. Come on, bud.
Come on, man. Thanks everybody for sticking for the entire 90 minutes, as I said. And thanks again, Remkes.
That's a lot of time. I respect that.
With anybody, I guess. And that too online, right? Not a lot of people like to watch something for 90 minutes straight. But this is good. This is great. Remkes, thanks again for being here and for telling your secrets of the WordPress universe, which you created. Yep. Right? I assume.
No, I did not.
So you're not the WordPress Jesus?
No. I lean on the shoulders of many other giants.
Like all of us. So
all of you.
Again, thanks for being here. Thanks for sharing your wonderful knowledge with us. And I wish we have another webinar with you in a much more deep diver, just demos, just CLI commands, basically optimizing site after site after site. So
Somebody send them their worst sites so we can work with that. That's a good one.
that's a good idea. You will
200
have to
plugins, load times of 10 seconds, that sort of stuff. Come
yeah.
at
And
me.
then we just delete plugin. Doom,
Yeah.
doom, doom, doom. So yeah, again, thanks again. This is an Indian thanks of both the hands. I don't know why I did that, but and there are more questions coming in. I don't know if we want to. What is the fastest you have ever got site to load? That's something to brag about. Yeah,
under 100 milliseconds.
that's uncached version.
That's the uncached version.
Awesome. That's something.
But that requires a budget. That's not default. That's not standard.
Yeah,
I'm happy. My general goal is to stay under 500 milliseconds, and that most of the times helps. Some cases it needs a rewrite of the entire theme and all that, but yeah.
I would love to see you optimize WP admin access. A lot of people struggle with that. I mean, they have an optimized site, cached, uncached both, but the WP admin loads really slow. So that's something we should talk about in one of the webinars.
Yeah, we could.
All right. All right. Thank you, everybody, again for being here. And this is goodbye for now. And thanks, Remgurs. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.